Hey folks, in this video we're going to start talking about how we can hope to represent objects in C. Now previously when we were using objects, when we were using classes, they were in a language like Java, they were OOP. So they basically had support for objects out of the box. We had things like that nice class keyword that would let us just define an object and be done with it. Unfortunately, things aren't going to be as simple for us because now we're not in an OOP language. We're in C, which doesn't have support for objects, right? It's an imperative / procedural language, right? It's just all about functions. So this is actually going to be a little bit interesting for us because now we're going to see how we need to, we're going to see what we need to do in order to actually implement what we call an object system here. And right, this is kind of my terminology, right? But that's basically what we're building, right? Is we're going to build a feature into our programming language. So I want objects. What do I need to worry about? Well, I'm going to need to worry about three key ideas. First of all, I need to worry about how to store state. So objects, right, have state. In the rectangle example, we said, oh, they have color, they have length, they have width. I need to worry about how I store my state. How do I store my data? That's something I'm going to have to figure out how to solve. Okay. Next thing I need to do, I need to figure out some way to construct or destruct objects, right? So how do I actually create things, right? How do I bring them into existence? This is going to be another problem that I need to solve. Finally, I need to have a way to invoke behavior on specific objects. So we said before, hey, it's primarily useful if I can have many of these things in my system. I don't want to have just one global thing, right? I want to have these different rectangles on the screen or whatnot. How do I tell a specific one to do something? Like for you, right? Change your color, right, to green all of a sudden, right? Or change your width to 10 instead of 5. I need to be able to tell certain objects to do specific things. So these are the three things we basically need to figure out some way to do in C if we want to implement an object system. Okay, so the next slide is going to tell us, we're going to have the discussion on how to do this, but before we get there, let's think about this last question on the slide. How do we do these things in Java, right? So Java already supports objects. How does it, satisfy these three key things, right, to support objects? How does it do it? So let's see, for storing state, how does it represent that in Java? Well, that's kind of one thing we get out of basically that class keyword, right? So that class keyword in Java, right, it lets us do things like define, a class which has, a int A, it's hard to read a little bit, int A, right, and then there's some other stuff in there, right? Basically, it's a way maybe to, and I put in my curlies here, right, it's a way basically to bind things together. So I can have my int A variable in there, maybe I also have my, I'll just go ahead and put in another variable, int B, that type of thing, right, and these should be semicolons here. So I can use a keyword class, right, I can use that basically to put different things together. And I can basically just keep everything together in one place, right? That'll represent my state. And I can even, right, because it's a proper OP language, so I can have all sorts of, functions here that do stuff, whatnot, right? I can have all sorts of stuff here. So that's one thing that the class keyword does for us. So let's see, what else do we need what else do we need? Well, constructing or destructing objects, this is actually in Java, the new keyword. So we have the new keyword, which lets us basically build the new things, right? It's like I have a new rectangle, something like that, right? I can use that to somehow construct a new object from a class blueprint, right? I can do stuff like that. That's construction, right? Destructing an object, we don't really have a specific way to do it in Java. Rather, it's kind of assumed that when we're done using it, the system will automatically destroy it. So maybe you can think back to ideas of like garbage collection, right? That's something that happens automatically. If we were in a language like C++, though, there would be a specific way, right, that we basically destroy things. That would be another thing to talk about. For now, though, let's just kind of focus on we do creation, right, via the new keyword. All right, last thing here, invoking behavior on specific objects. What do we do for that? That is actually, and you may not have heard the term, but we'd call that, well, it's this thing here, which is also known as the dot operator. So the dot operator is basically a feature inside of Java, right, in many programming languages, of a way basically to invoke a particular behavior off of an object, right? So that's literally a dot on my screen, and it's called the dot operator, right? So the dot operator lets us take a variable that basically stores an object, we do that dot on it, and all of a sudden we can call behavior from it, right? We can make this particular variable, right, the object in this particular variable, do something for us, right? So that's the dot operator. So those are the three things we have, right? We have basically classes which lets us bring together things. We have new, which lets us create things. We have the dot operator that lets us basically call things, make things actually happen. So these are the three things we have in Java, right, to support object systems. How do we do this in C? That's the question. So what can we do? First of all, for storing state, what if we just use a struct? We know we need to take different pieces of data. We had now int A, int B in the previous slide. If we have different pieces of data, how do we put them together? The most natural way is something like a struct, right? We basically want to bind these things together so that they're all together. It's like this pool of data, right, that I can do stuff with. And this is, actually gets us a lot of stuff here, right, that we want. And it could almost go all the way to objects, right, except that we can't actually add functions to a struct, right? A struct in C is just going to be those pieces of data, right? It's not going to be anything else, right? If we had a way to add functions to it, and those functions could manipulate the variables inside the struct, then we would actually have an object, right? But we don't have that. We just have data. Okay, so that's a little bit of a limitation. We'll have to figure out some way around that later on. All right, next point here. Constructing, destructing objects, what do we do there? This is where maybe things become a little bit different. So we know basically that we need to have some way to create an object, right? The equivalent of that new keyword. Well, we're in C, we don't have the new keyword. What do? Well, we make a new function, right? That's the way you solve all the problems, right, in C, is you just make a new function. So we can have a new function, which basically would act like a constructor, right? Thinking back to Java keywords, right? Constructor. And that function basically would take in some parameters similar to what a constructor would take in, and it would build a new struct and populate the data inside of it. Okay, and then it would return that back, right? So basically, we would build this struct that represents the state of an object, right? And later on, maybe we want to destroy it, we would have another destructor function, which basically takes in this struct that represents the data for an object, right? And it'll have access to that, right? It'll be able to clean it up, right? And then clear it from the system. Okay, so those are going to basically be two functions we need to add, right? We're going to add that creation function, that destruction function. All right, we're almost there. Last thing, invoking behavior on specific objects. What do we do here? Well, we can't put functions inside of structs, right? That's where our problem kind of comes from. So what do we do? Well, again, we're going to make new functions. But we're going to make functions that are going to look a little bit odd because they're not going to be, well, they're not going to be standalone. They're going to look like basically a function which takes an extra argument. So imagine if you were, you're in Java, you have a function, this function, or function/method, right? And it needs to do some stuff, right? Maybe it takes a couple of parameters, okay, that's fine. And then you know that because you're in Java, it's like, well, I can use those instance variables for free, right? They're just immediately available to me. Well, we don't have that behavior in C out of the box. How do we get that? Well, we get it basically by adding an extra argument to that function, right? So we want to have a function that does something, right? And so it'll take in the normal arguments that you might have, right, coming into a method on an object, but it'll also take in a new special argument, which is basically going to be a reference to this object struct, right? The struct where the data for the object is being stored, the one that, right, that was constructed by the other function, that'll be destroyed by the other function, right? That'll basically come in as an extra parameter, right? And so then that means that that particular function will basically have the context, right, have that data to manipulate it, right? So then we have basically that same functionality as we do have in Java, where it's like, well, I can change the state of the object because now, right, instead of it basically being available to me just instantly as member variables in the right scope, now they come in as a struct. And so I can do a dot on the struct and get access to the different things that I'll need, okay? So then I have basically my data that I can transform as I want. All right, so that's what we need, right? We have our three different techniques here, right? We want to be able to store data, right, or store state, construct or destruct objects, right, invoke behavior. Those are the three things we need. So we have some ideas here. This kind of is what we need, right, to move forward with objects in C. In the next video, what we'll start looking at is how to actually put together kind of an outline of an object in C, right? And as we move forward, we'll even go through and actually implement it. So that's all I got for you guys in this video. I'll see you later on.